The city lights sparkled against the night sky as Richard Alcott, a billionaire known for his sharp tongue and ruthless business strategies, stepped out of his limousine with impatience etched into every line of his face. He was angry after a frustrating board meeting that hadn't gone his way, and he wanted nothing more than to release his rage on someone. As he walked briskly toward his towering office building, a frail homeless woman staggered into his path, clutching a battered old bag and wearing tattered clothes that barely held together. Her face was dirty, her hands trembling as if she had not eaten for days, but her eyes, those weary, glassy eyes, had a strange, searching glimmer in them. Richard, blinded by his temper, raised his hand, ready to slap the woman for daring to block his way. The world seemed to slow at that moment, the cold breeze brushing between them, as if the universe itself held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next in this unexpected collision between wealth and destitution. The homeless woman looked up at him, her cracked lips forming silent words before she finally whispered in a hoarse voice that broke through his rage like a shard of glass, "Don't slap her. She's your missing mother." The words stopped Richard mid-motion, his hand frozen in the air as his chest tightened in disbelief. For a moment he thought he had misheard, but the woman repeated it, louder this time, her voice trembling yet carrying the weight of truth. "She's your mother, the one you've been searching for." Richard's mind reeled, his carefully built composure cracking. Years ago, his mother had vanished without explanation, leaving him with a broken childhood and questions that had haunted his empire's foundation. No detective had ever succeeded in finding her, and he had convinced himself she was either dead or had abandoned him forever. His heart had hardened, and he had buried the memory deep under ambition and power. Now this filthy stranger dared to tell him that his mother was alive and standing right before him. His eyes searched the woman's face, and behind the wrinkles, the grime, and the hollow cheeks, he began to notice a familiar curve of the jaw, a faint resemblance to the face that had once kissed him goodnight. His chest constricted, torn between anger, shock, and the aching possibility that the truth had been standing on the streets all along. Unseen and unloved, the homeless woman reached out a shaking hand, but Richard instinctively stepped back, his heart pounding like a war drum inside his chest. "This can't be true," he muttered to himself, but the certainty in her eyes made denial impossible. He remembered the lullabies she used to sing, the soft hands that once wiped his tears when he was a boy. Even in her brokenness, her voice carried the same cadence, the same tenderness that no stranger could imitate. The billionaire, who had faced ruthless competitors and world leaders, now found himself utterly powerless before the fragile figure in front of him. His hand that was once raised to strike now trembled as he slowly lowered it, shame creeping into his veins like poison. The guards, confused and uneasy, looked to him for orders, but he waved them off with a sudden wave of his arm, unable to let anyone interrupt this revelation. He struggled to breathe, his soul collapsing under the realization that the very person he had almost struck in cruelty was the one who had given him life. The city's noise dimmed, and for the first time in decades, Richard felt like a lost child again. Tears welled in her eyes as she tried to explain, her words broken but filled with desperate sincerity. "I didn't leave you because I wanted to," she cried, her voice cracking like old paper. "There were circumstances, dangers you didn't know about. I lost everything, Richard, including the ability to come back to you. I watched from afar, too broken to step into your world of success. I thought I would only bring you shame." Richard's anger melted into confusion, his emotions a storm he couldn't control. He had spent his life building walls of steel around his heart, but now those walls were crumbling in the presence of the woman who had once been his safe haven. Every word she spoke clawed at the emptiness inside him, reopening wounds he thought had healed. The billionaire, used to controlling every deal and every decision, now stood powerless in the face of a truth he couldn't negotiate. He saw not just a homeless woman, but a mother who had suffered silently, carrying her pain in shadows while he lived in towers of glass and gold. Richard's knees buckled, and for the first time in years, he felt his pride shatter. He dropped to the cold pavement, kneeling before her, while passers-by stopped to witness the shocking sight of one of the richest men in the world bowing to a beggar woman. Whispers spread like wildfire among the onlookers, but Richard didn't care. His voice shook as he asked, "Why didn't you come back to me? Do you know what I went through without you?" His mother's face twisted with guilt. her trembling fingers brushing against his cheek, smearing the trail of tears he hadn't realized were falling. "I thought you would be better off without me," she whispered, "but I was wrong. Every night I prayed to see you again. I followed your rise from the shadows, proud but too ashamed to step forward." The words tore into Richard's soul, leaving him gasping with the pain of lost years, of nights spent in bitterness when love had been only a heartbeat away. For the first time he saw the futility of his billions, the emptiness of his empire, when compared to the warmth of a mother's touch he had almost forgotten. The billionaire gathered her into his arms, ignoring the smell of the streets clinging to her clothes, and held her as though he would never let go again. People gasped, phones recorded, headlines were being written at that very moment, but Richard cared for none of it. His entire world narrowed to the frail woman whose heartbeat echoed faintly against his chest. He remembered the day he last saw her, the unanswered questions, the bitterness that fueled his rise, and now he understood that all along, fate had been playing a cruel game. She had not abandoned him. She had been lost in a world that was crueler to the weak, crushed beneath the weight of misfortune while he had soared to heights of luxury. In that embrace, Richard realized that wealth could not fill the void her absence had left, and no amount of power could rewrite the past. But here she was, alive, and he vowed never to let her slip away again. Slowly, Richard rose to his feet, still holding her close, and turned to his driver. "Cancel all my meetings. Take us home," he ordered, his voice steady but choked with emotion. The driver, stunned, nodded quickly, while the guards stepped aside, unsure how to process the extraordinary moment unfolding before them. The homeless woman, his mother, looked overwhelmed, glancing nervously at the limousine, a symbol of a world that no longer felt like hers. "I don't belong there," she murmured, shaking her head, but Richard pressed her hand firmly, his eyes fierce. "You belong with me, always. Money built these walls, but you are the foundation of who I am. Without you, none of it matters." His words,